Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Above the Bar podcast, where each week we belly up to the bar with a new guest, find out what they do, who they are, and what makes them great. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. All right. Welcome back to the Above the Bar podcast. It's your host, Sean. We're belling up. We're actually in a bar that's not my bar today, but it's somebody else's bar.
That's surreal.
It's like this is what is it? One of those not Interstellar. What's the movies where it's like Inception, where it's like a dream inside of a dream. It's a bar inside of a bar inside of a bar. So we have the distinct opportunity today, folks. We're bellying up to the bar with John. Is it Curtin or Certain? Curtin.
Yeah,
I'm certain it is John Curtin that we're belling up to the bar with today. One of the owners of Albany Distilling Company. He's a historian of Albany distilling, of New York fermented beverages.
I prefer the term nerd.
Nerd of all these things. On top of some of the niceties that John has, he has the distinction of harassing Lord Commander Cuomo at one point in time, which we're definitely going to tell that story because I find it hilarious.
Sure.
Because I think all politicians are clueless to what's around them. He's done a little bit of everything, so we're going to say it now. John, welcome to the bar.
Thanks for having me. Welcome, likewise. Welcome to the bar.
And welcome to I'm welcome to his bar it'll just go back and forth this whole time. So let's go ahead and do some house cleaning. As you can see, folks that are watching us live right now, we don't have our normal distinction of having the big sign with the Ravens logo behind us, but that's okay. You can still send us, if you have a cause, sticker and a cause, if you have something that you're supporting, something you believe in, whether it be a charitable organization, whether it be a podcast you're doing, if you have a bar, you have a distilling company that you're trying to support, whatever it is that you're trying to do, you can send us a message through Facebook, the Above the Bar podcast, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch. All of those are the Above the Bar podcast, or Instagram is the Above the Bar podcast. The only one that's different, because they just don't like me for whatever reason, is Twitter. But you can still type in the Above the Bar podcast and it'll pop up. But it's at Above the Bar 4 on Twitter. And John and I are going to hold hands here for a moment. We're almost at it. I love to have somebody as squirrely as me around who's just like, wait a sec, can I get a hammer in the middle of this? Can I just get a hammer? We'll just go fix this.
This is the occupational hazard of doing it here. I'm going to get up in the middle of the podcast and scrape some off.
There's something over there. It's good to have somebody as squirrely as I am. The other side to this, folks, is if you need to up the octane of your podcast or your media thing, make sure you reach out to Media by Dibs. He's on LinkedIn as Andrew Dibble. All his other social media is Media by Dibs. You mentioned belly up to the bar. He's going to give you a 10% discount on your first piece of media and a free consultation. He's another Marine supporting veterans. Let him know what you're looking for, and he'll take care of you. All right. All the accoutrement is done. I'm going to say this right now, and I want to, if you haven't had Albany Distilling, which I'm going to plug John many times in this, but one of the things I'm going to tell him that I'm so happy about. So everyone who listens to the show knows I like Heaven's Hill bourbon. That's something I enjoy.
Well, nobody's perfect.
I mean, I've enjoyed that for a while, but I went to go pick up some Heaven's Hill bourbon not long ago, and $60 for a bottle of what's really not. I have a friend that lives in Kentucky, and he'll tell you, bro, that shit's everywhere. What's the reason? But I talked to some of the distributors up here, and they've gotten into the game of what's the right term when they don't send you enough of it?
Scarcity.
Right.
Yeah. Artificial scarcity.
Yeah, artificial scarcity, saying, "Oh no, we don't have enough."
All right. Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm going to tell all of you is go find you some Ironweed, and it's not 420 weed, folks. It's the other kind of Ironweed. But go find you some, because the reality of it is one of the things that John and his partner have done to make sure that everything stays right is they refuse to fake being scarce, and they didn't boost their prices during COVID. And that in and of itself, John, let me give you one more of these. So let's get into this. So let's start with let's talk about the birth of Albany Distilling. How did that come around?
I mean, it was really, the anecdotal, jokey version is that I was a teacher before this. I was an English teacher, and teaching led to lots of drinking. So I thought, let's cut the middleman right out here. Let's just. So that was sort of the genesis of it was just wanting something a little bit different to do. I'd been teaching for a long time, not a long time. I felt like forever. I taught for about 3 years, and I actually moved back to Albany. I was actually the last place I lived before I moved back here was Scotland.
What?
Yeah. So before that, I was in Providence, Rhode Island. I was teaching in Attleboro in southeast Massachusetts. There, I was teaching middle school, which is a nightmare. But Scotland had a teaching shortage, which was odd. And so I figured, like, I was young, I was mid 20s, late 20s, and what are the odds of me ever being able to move to an English-speaking European country with my minimal qualifications? Right, I got an English degree. So I thought I'll give it a shot. I applied to a few different schools. One of them asked me over for an interview. I went during my February break, and I just hopped in a plane. Spent the day there interviewing. They offered me the job on the spot. So a couple months later, I was back on a plane. So I lived there for about a year. There's a distillery near us where I lived. I was in the middle of nowhere. It's a place called Cigar. It was in the southwest corner. It was really, middle of nowhere doesn't even begin to describe it. Our closest movie theater was about 45 minutes to an hour away in air. Right, it was really this backwater, beautiful area, one of the most untouched parts of Europe, actually. Oddly, anyway, I was there for a year, and I was teaching English literature, grammar, all that stuff. And what I realized was that my students didn't have, well, again, we're seeing the consequences of this now, but these were kids who had grown up with the internet, and they had no idea how to distinguish good from bad information, right? We're seeing, again, like now, it's been come full circle, and it's had global consequences. But basically, these kids would go on and they would do the research. The easy example is we did Catcher in the Rye, right? Which they all hated.
You mean they didn't enjoy old English literature?
I mean, it's interesting. Like the classical canon of literature is there's basically it's like what exists by default, right? There wasn't a ton of literature that survived from that era, from Middle Ages, for example. Like we did Beowulf and all other very typical Middle English things, but there's such a broad range of 20th century literature that's fantastic. And every school has the same garbage. Anyway, this is a total side tangent.
Left turns is always. We had hard left. It's nothing wrong with it.
So these kids, they were all juniors in high school. We were doing Catcher in the Rye. They all hated it. They thought Holden was an idiot, which I don't disagree. And they thought it was very pandery, right? Like this is what adults think of kids, kind of a thing, which is way off the mark. And I agree with them. Anyway, so there's a good hook. It was nice that they, like most books, they're kind of indifferent about, like Shakespeare, they're kind of take it or leave it, but they really hated Catcher in the Rye, so they were very passionate about it. And so I got some of my best work out of them because they were so pissed off about it. Anyway, so they wrote these phenomenal research papers, and a lot of them were taking the argument, or taking the position that Holden Caulfield is not a typical teenager. Like this is not a good example of what life as a teenager is like. So they use that they channel that resentment very well. Anyway, so they're writing these papers, and they're these really well done, well cited papers, and they use a lot of good information from the book. But then I went and looked at their sources, and it was Wikipedia. They were citing Prozac.com to talk about depression. This is.
That doesn't make any sense.
It does, but you can't.
That was their source.
Exactly, and they were 16-year-old kids. When was this timeline wise? So they were born, early 90s. So they had never known an era without the internet. Nobody had ever sat them down and said, like, "Hey, folks, these are legitimate sources. These are not. These are if you're looking at the information, this is how to tell, where it's coming from, what the biases are." They had none of that.
Proof sourcing.
Exactly. Yeah. And really, like, if you think about it, when we were kids, we didn't necessarily have that either, except that there was a barrier to entry, right? If you're writing an academic text or research paper or something, it had to be published, right? So there were layers of
Process.
Exactly, and there were lots of eyes that saw it. But now anybody can publish anything.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the thing. Like, anybody can be a publisher.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, so a buddy of mine, Lincoln, who's been published in Whiskey Magazine and all that. He wants you to know he lucked out and never had to read, not Catcher in the Rye, just Rye. But I'm going to tell you, Lincoln, if when you get a chance, and I got to get you out of New York City. I know you're scared to leave the city sometimes. We get you up here to Albany Distilling, and you have their malt. Like, their rye is unbelievable, but when you have their malt, that's the one that I tell everyone. It's the only whiskey I've ever had that tastes like summer, because it tastes, as soon as it hits the inside of your nose, it instantaneously is like you smell leather, like a fresh baseball glove. How bad's that? Being told we got a little bit of an echo here, but Lincoln did just say journalism 101, confirm, hours in the library. Jeanette, who's from over there, we have a bottle of Ironweed bourbon batch number 3, bottle number 7, 1212. Her husband refuses to open.
How long was it aged?
What's the age on that, Jeanette? And I'm going to tell you, now see, it's funny that he would refuse to open that, and I want to get your feeling on this, because I watched a great documentary called Neat, and it has one of the master distillers from over at Buffalo Trace, and his father was a master distiller there, and the father had given him whatever that real expensive one from Buffalo Trace is. It's the person's name.
Eagle Rare. Pappy.
Pappy. Yeah. That's it. And he had a bottle of Pappy, and he's like, "Oh, I'm not gonna open this," and this whole thing, and the father was like, "Why are you not this? It was made to be enjoyed."
It's right. I mean, I can see both sides of it, though, right? Like, I have bottles from my first few batches. I wish I had more, honestly, but at the time it was like, you gotta keep lights on. It wasn't
Well, that's different, yeah.
And they're fun to open up, right? And I think part of it is, and a lot of this was a more recent revelation, so to speak. Maybe revelation's a bit extreme, but something I've thought a lot about with COVID, right? Like, I've got bottles at home, not my bottles, but other whiskeys that are not for consumption, right there, which is silly, right? So to use another example, so this place I lived in Scotland, this Stranraer, again, middle of nowhere, there was a distillery somewhat nearby called Bladnoch, and the Scottish, the Scotch industry is a weird world. A lot of big players that kind of control the small players. Anyway, so Bladnoch was this tiny little place, and it's been opened and closed over the past century or so, right? Just because this delicious, non-peated lowland malt. And I was over there, visited them. They ran me through the whole place. Again, they don't get many tourists there. It's really it's off the beaten path. like there's the beaten path and there's off the beaten path, and then there's where I was living. And so, they gave me the run of the place. And when I got home, I realized that I hadn't brought a bottle of Bladnock with me, which is disappointing. Anyway, I was in one of the local liquor stores here, and there's a series of scotches. It's a signatory series. I don't know if it still exists.
I fixed it.
All right. I don't know if it still exists, but anyway, it was in the bottom shelf. It was dusty, and it was a bottle of 14-year-old Bladnock whiskey that I got for, I don't know, $30 because nobody had ever. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, that bottle is never going to be opened. Or I have no plans to open it. Which is silly.
Well, you found something. You found a jewel.
Yeah, but what's the use of it if I'm never going to drink it, right? It's just a decoration. Now, on the other hand,
I have to tell you, Jeanette says it's not because he doesn't want to drink it. It's because it's one of the first few of a new batch that was ever made and bought others since. So there's support. So okay, we forgive you. We forgive you, Jeanette.
Yeah,
we love Jeanette because Jeanette is where you lived in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
Jeanette lived in the most exotic place of anyone I've ever known. She lived in Papua New Guinea.
Oh,
like how cool is that?
That's very cool.
And Lincoln says that you should put on the bottle "Tastes like summer." Nate wants us to send a bottle out to Maryland, but that actually brings up a point. I wanted to bring this up. I don't know if we can talk about this. Can we talk about
whatever you want?
Well, I'm just saying, like, I don't know if it was for everyone's consumption about where we're going to be able to find this Albany Distilling here soon.
And the whiskeys, unfortunately, are still pretty limited in scope, just because we don't have much. I mean, we have a tiny little still, 600 gallons, 600 liters, but 160 gallons. We make about 2 barrels a week. That's running the still 6 times a week, 6 days a week, which amounts to 80 or 90 barrels a year, give or take. And then they sit there and they leak for 4 years, and then that's a whole. We can talk about that later. They sit and they leak for 4 years, and then when we bottle them, we get maybe 320 bottles per barrel. So we really struggle to keep it in stock, and it's not a bad problem to have, but
it's not in a douchey way either. It's not like
just everything we make we sell. We don't really. The only time we hold things back, honestly, are for the bar. If this is sorry, customers, but the bar gets priority, right? If that's it. But otherwise,
well, because this is going to be the simplest place. And folks, if you're in the Albany area, it's on Livingston Ave, just down from the Leo O'Brien building, right off the off the Hudson a little bit. But I'm going to tell you, this is. As soon as I got in here, it reminded me of a bar from back home in Baltimore, you would see this in New York City. It's the red brick inside. It's the subway tile covering the bar.
You can't see now because there's a foot of snow out there. Right, a beautiful patio,
nice big patio out back. So, and for those of you that are pizza whores, what's the
Fazios?
The Fazios, but what's the show?
Oh,
the pizza guy that everybody talks so highly.
Barstool Sports.
Barstool Sports pizza guy.
It's like one of his favorite pizzas ever.
Yeah, like he goes to the Fazios. The guy doesn't miss the place. So I want to tell you, we might have something kind of like Albany doesn't have they do have tiny hot dogs. I always talk about the tiny hot dogs because I like the tiny hot dogs. But you gotta definitely get it. But Nate wants to know what's the difference between the stills. Like what's the
Well, we only have one still, but and speaking generally, there are two, I guess 2.5 major kinds of still. One is the pot still, which is batch distillation. That's what you see, going back thousands of years to the earliest form of distillation. It's really not complicated science-wise. It's you get a vessel, you put some mixture of alcohol and water in it, beer, whatever, mead, any sort of fermented liquid, and you set it up so that you boil it off. And you have a way of collecting the steam in such a way that different temperature steam is collected in different ways. Basically, you just making sure that you're getting the alcohol out and leaving the water behind. It's really not super complicated. Again, this is how distillation's been done for hundreds, thousands of years. So we have a pot still, but then attached to that pot still, we have a column. And so it's kind of a hybrid still. And what a column does, it's a fraction column, and these really developed in the mid 19th century for petroleum, because you get crude oil, and you can crack that out into from diesel. I don't know how many.
Right, all the different. Yeah.
Gasoline, propane. Is propane? Yeah. Up to natural gas. So when you process oil, you use a column still because every compound in the oil has a different boiling temperature. And with a column still, what you're doing is you're fractioning out all those different chemicals based on their volatility, based on what temperature they boil at. And we do the same thing with alcohol, but it's a much easier process because it's just ethanol and water, right? We're not dealing with a dozen different compounds. We're dealing with two. That being said, that's a bit of an oversimplification. We do get some off chemicals that are produced during fermentation. We get acetone, ether, aldehydes. Nothing.
Some secret squirrel shit.
Well, yeah. Well,
that only shows up. That only shows up in Albany Distilling. Secret squirrel.
Well, yeah. Well, the advantage of doing it as batch distillation is that those chemicals are very volatile, right? So they have very low boiling points. Those come off first. They're what are called the four shots at the heads, so we can just get rid of those and then move into the ethanol. But so for whiskey production, the still we have is essentially a fancy pot still.
So they're and I think it's part of it, like different signs. He goes, Nate's all into this. Like, Nate, you're into it. Is it about the same as a moonshine still setup?
I mean, moonshine. The thing with moonshine is that it's not really moonshine just means anything made illegally. So generally speaking, yeah, a moonshine.
It's like when people make brandies. You can have brandy moonshine. Moonshine just means it was made at night under the shine of the moon,
exactly,
and you're not paying taxes on it.
Yes. So your typical moonshine still, yeah, would be something homemade. Generally, would be a pot still. And it's just a vessel that you use to hold the liquid or whatever you're distilling, and then a neck. There's all different ways to separate out the steam. But basically, what you're doing is you're boiling off this liquid, and because alcohol is a lower boiling temperature than water, you want to keep it at as steady a boiling temperature as possible. You want to keep it so ethanol boils at about 173 degrees Fahrenheit, and water is obviously 212. So you want to keep it somewhere in that range, right? So you want to keep it. We have German equipment, so it's all Celsius. So we do ours at 98 degrees Celsius. We're 2 degrees below the boiling point of water. Ethanol boils at 78.3 degrees Celsius. So we're in that closer to the water range. But the idea is that we want to make sure we're boiling off all the ethanol that we can, with minimal water being included in that steam. So basically, what you're doing is you're creating you're going from a liquid that's mostly water to a steam that's mostly ethanol, and then you're just using the basically it's entropy, right? The steam is allowed to rise into a certain area, and then at some point it's being siphoned off into a condenser to cool it back down to liquid, and that's what you collect. It really is simple chemistry.
Nate's like, this has always fascinated me. That's cool. So we come back from Scotland, and
all right. So I learned my lesson.
Should have brought back to like the fancy scotch.
Nah. I mean, I'm not honestly. I like scotch. A little bit. Not a huge scotch fan.
Like I don't know. See, but scotch is peat moss, right?
A lot of it is. So there's different. People talk about the different regions of Scotland. So most of the scotch that people drink is blended. So it comes from all over. But you've got your Highland malts, you got your Speyside, you've got your Lowlands, you've got your Isla malts, and a lot of the Highland, it's really like a lot of what we drink and eat, really, but just we'll try to stick to whiskey here. It's done the way it's made the way it is because that's the way it was made. And peat is a really clunky way of heating things, right? You've got to go out into the bog, you've got to cut it, you've got to dry it, you've got to now they compress it, right? It's a process that if people have an alternative to it, they'll use it. So a lot of the lowland malts and the Speysides and so forth, they were made with coal, right? So on closed malting floors. So the peat was really just sort of an accident, right? So the way that malt is made is, malt is a weird term. So malt means germinated barley. So if you think about a seed, in any seed, you have the husk, the grain on the outside. You have the endosperm, which is all the grain, the starch in the middle, rather. At the base, you have the germ, what does the actual growth. So, again, I'm talking broad strokes here. Most of that grain, most of that seed, whatever it is starch. Starch is great for storage. Right? It's very stable. It's very compact, but it's not very easy to use. That's why it makes it so stable, is that it's inaccessible. That holds true for the plant as well, right? If the plant wants to grow, it needs energy to do that. So it makes these little starch pods. And when whatever conditions are met for the germ to come to life and start growing, one of the first things it does is it releases an enzyme into that starch that turns it into sugar. And now sugar is obviously very easy to use. Right? It's a ready source of.
And that's a main ingredient for all liquors and everything.
Yeah,
right.
And it's any seed essentially. Sprouts.
I promise, folks, we are going to get to how John got to Albany Distilling.
Oh yeah, no,
it's happening. And Lincoln, get new friends if they don't like bourbon. Lincoln, get new friends. Get new friends if they don't like bourbon. That's all I can tell you.
I mean, plenty of other whiskeys. Rye, I prefer rye to bourbon. Anyway, so the malting process is you germinate these grains. They start to sprout. They create sugar, but if you allow them to keep growing, they'll use up all the sugar, sprouting. So you have to kill them, and the Scots do that with smoke.
Okay,
they smoke them out. They heat them up, and that's where that smoky flavor comes from. So for a lot of scotches, that's done just because was the default way of doing it. Yeah, and the islands didn't have peat, so they used dried up seaweed. So that's where you get that real acidic, acrid, iodine, super smoky scotches. Anyway, so move back here, and I learned my lesson in terms of information literacy. So I actually moved back to Albany for my master's in library science, and that's what I was doing when I started this place.
So you were in college. Goal was master's degree, and that never an intention to. Did you stumble across in the library, kind of like the TV show The Librarians? You stumbled across something and didn't realize. And we're going to get into, folks. He's got a couple of stories that if we're going to get to about where it's the malt that's from the is it the malt recipe? Where's the special recipe come from?
Oh, there's the rum recipe.
That's the rum recipe.
Yeah.
The rum recipe. We're going to get into that. We're getting into a little bit more, but look, if you haven't tried Albany Distilling Company's different variations, if you can find any of it that's left, I don't know how many is on the shelf. They at one point in time were partnered with Death Wish Coffee.
Oh, we still do there.
Okay, you're still doing that one. So the Death Wish vodka.
So just for clarity, we changed it to Awakened Spirit vodka.
That's right. You did tell me the name was changed.
It was getting so confusing. They're both liquids, coffee-based liquids. So people were calling us looking for the coffee. People were calling them looking for the vodka. It
Gotcha.
just got to be too much.
So it's
Awakened Spirit.
Awakened Spirit has Death Wish coffee in it.
Yes. Yeah.
So make sure you're checking that one out, which is amazing. Lincoln has a question for you right off the bat, and I got to grab a hold of Miss Jen when she has a chance. I want to try to get one of the malts or another rye, either one. My wife's going to pick me up if I need it. But one of the things that Lincoln has, and this is where Lincoln knows this business better than I would. Mm-hmm. He wants to know cask strength whiskey, marketing term or legit term.
I mean,
is it worth the money?
It's stronger. So whenever we open up a barrel, so it goes in. We barrel it at a.
Look at that.
Yeah.
And they got good ice too. Like, that's not bullshit. Good ice is important.
I don't disagree.
Like, go ahead. So you open up the barrel.
Open up the barrel. All right. So federal law says we have to put it in the barrel. We have to distill it below 80%, and then it has to go into the barrel below 125 proof, 62.5%. So we generally barrel at, say, 56 to 59% alcohol. We usually lose about 1% in the barrel. Take it out, see how it turned out. But because every barrel is going to come out at a slightly different proof, that's just the way it works. What we do is we dilute it down to a universal 43% for everything that we bottle. So and that's not a complicated. Well, it's a pain in the ass, but it's not a archaic process. We just add water to it to get it down to that 43%. So you're buying.
Oh, really? So it's cut. Where?
Yeah. So when you're buying a barrel strength whiskey, you're just getting the uncut version.
So is it more of a marketing thing, or do you think it's worth it for, or is it what it sounds like to me? What I'm hearing is if you just want a stronger whiskey, it's a stronger whiskey that's uncut.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like when you buy from concentrate.
Yeah,
that's what it sounds like.
Yeah. So it's worth it if you're getting your money's worth out of it, right? So if you're getting 25% more whiskey, so to speak, and you're only paying 25% more for the bottle, fine. But otherwise, it's just a matter of taste.
So your partner in crime in all this, the mad scientist that he is.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you guys connect that all this gets started?
So I actually started with a different partner, which didn't work out. So I was solo for a few minutes, which was terrible. And then I met Rick. So Rick was actually, I refer to him as a recovering brewer. He went to school for brewing. So he's got more of the technical end covered, especially when it comes to the fermentation and stuff. Essentially, what we're doing with whiskey is taking beer and purifying it.
They're pretty close in the process. Like you can get to a point where you're almost there in a whiskey, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, really, the key difference between whiskey and beer is that whiskey is not hopped. Or there are no hops in whiskey. In beer, you're generally using all malted grain, all malt barley usually. So when you say malt, that's another weird thing. So any grain can be malted, right? Because again, malting is just germination. You germinate and you kill it. So any grain can be malted. But for whatever reason, barley has become the default malt grain, right? So when you talk about malt whiskey, malt vinegar, malted milkshakes, whatever, you're talking about barley.
I like them all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great
malt on my French fries, malted vinegar on French fries.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love malted milkshakes.
But when I'm into it. When you say malt, when malt vinegar, it's barley vinegar.
Okay.
That's barley. But any grain can be malted. So when we talk about like the rye, for example, I use most rye, unmalted rye, and then I use malt whiskey, malted wheat rather than malted barley. Whereas with beer, you're generally using 100% malt grain.
Okay.
Generally use 100% malted barley. So like bourbon, mostly corn, not a lot of corn-based beers.
That's gross.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to give that. Oh wait, that's not that one. I'm not drinking corn beer.
So, yeah, so that's really the key difference there. But yeah, when you talk about the aging process, that's where the other part comes in, right? So, you take this beer, purify out the ethanol, stick it in a barrel, and that's really where the difference is. Obviously, the strength and the flavors, but beer is generally just made and bottled right away. There's no 4-year wait.
Yeah, no, like I don't think of. Well, that's like a lot of the beers now. What's the one that Lawson's?
Mhm.
Lawson's is like made cold, sold cold, date on the side of it. Needs to be drank within a set amount of time,
Sure.
or they're saying pull that off the shelves. It's not as good as it could be, and we don't want our name attached to that
Right.
type of a flavor.
And a lot of that too is because the yeast that's used in beer, like lagers, for example, needs a very cold range of temperatures. Because the other thing with beer is that whatever goes into the production process eventually is going into a bottle. Whereas the whiskey, because we're distilling it out, we're removing the bulk of what's of the ingredients. We're just getting the ethanol out.
That's it.
Yeah. So it's a lot more forgiving, right? Like with beer, all those ingredients, whatever you put into the kettle, essentially
Inside my glass.
going straight into glass. Yeah. So whiskey, we have a few steps in between to kind of even things out.
All right. So you and Rick fall in love.
Yep.
And you make a whiskey or a vodka. What was the first iteration? So I'm kind of curious. Like, so let's go. I'm gonna roll it back one more.
Yeah, sure.
So let's roll it back first. So you and Rick hook up, and it's love at first taste, and you guys are putting it all together. You like that one, didn't you? And you guys are putting this whole thing together, and you're trying to figure out, moving forward, where you were already bottling at that point.
Yeah.
Right?
So
you were there.
Yeah.
How does he show up into all this? Is like, all right, well, we're gonna do this next.
I mean, it's basically I was at a point where, so I'll back up again. I started off doing the bourbon. That was the first product, followed by rum. And the downside to bourbon or rye or whatever is that weight, right? You make it, so all your money goes into it, and then you sit on it
For 7 years, it gets.
in some cases.
What is the earliest for bourbon? 4?
So bourbon has no minimum actually. The rule is it has to go into a new barrel. So as long as it's a charred new oak container, you can age it for 10 seconds if you want. But then after that, you can't use the barrel again, right? So there's the built-in sort of catch there, right? You can't. So our first bourbons, that's what I was asking where your friend had how old the bottle was. The first bourbons we made were 3 months old. We made those little 10-gallon barrels, and then we over time scaled up to 6 months, 9 and 12 and 18, and then we hit 2 years, and we jumped from 2 years to 4 years.
Now, why so short a time at first? Was it just, hey, we want to get this product out there. We got to make money. We got to keep the lights on. It's the only way you're going to keep the lights on is getting it out there. Okay.
It wasn't bad. I mean, the thing to bear in mind too is we're making this in very small batches. We still are. So we're starting with a pretty good liquid going into the barrel. So, I mean, I prefer the older barrels in a lot of cases, but sometimes it's nice to have that real young bourbon. It's a different range of flavors. It's much more raw bourbon flavor compared to.
I'm gonna show Jen for a second. I didn't do a good thing. See,
Sure.
There's Jen over there, folks. If you can't see her, like if you come out here, like you can get legit cocktails, maybe the whole 9 yards. I guess it's dog. We're dog friendly.
Yep.
See the puppy, dog friendly. So I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's
I had
fine.
to show that because it was like we could hear it, and I wanted everybody to know what was going on.
Yeah.
So
We're dog friendly. We're not, because strictly speaking, we're not a bar. We're a tasting room.
see, that's such a
Yeah.
look at that. That's I love how just a little shift in the verbiage. No, not a bar. We are
We look like a bar.
looks like a bar, feels like a bar, tastes like a bar.
We are a farm distilling tasting room.
So you and Rick are in this piece.
Yep.
Lincoln wants Jen to know. Hey Jen, Lincoln would like you to know that that's a nice shaker you have. Sounds like home. She appreciates that, Lincoln. So so all this is going. Yeah, you guys were on. All this is going on.
We'll get you waivers to sign.
Yeah, it's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll sign waivers for your face and likeness. It's okay. Don't worry. It'll all work out. So you and Rick are hooking up.
Yeah.
First things is the bourbon.
Yep.
Where do we start moving into new elements?
So the bourbon and rum were pretty quick. The real game changer with having Rick on board was that suddenly we could start to scale our production up because he knew what he was doing. We hired Luke, who's
Luke is awesome.
Yep. So that's when we were able to branch out into vodka and other things, right? So it's in retrospect, we really should have started with those things because, like vodka, for example, doesn't require time. Right? You make it, you bottle it, it's out the door. Bourbon is a pain in the ass. You make it, you barrel it, watch it, look at it,
watch a little bit more,
smell it, leaking.
You love the fact that that's the Angels cut though.
Those angels are fucking
Bunch of those angels are a bunch of lushes, aren't they?
They are. There's drunk angels everywhere.
Just everywhere, angels just like. So listen here. I want everyone to know.
Yeah.
Lincoln says vodka pays the bills.
Yeah, that is the universal credo across the industry, right? Like whether you're a bar, restaurant, distillery, liquor store, distributor, vodka pays the bills.
Now
Lincoln knows his stuff.
I'm gonna have to get. That's why I'm trying to get him to come up here and get him to maybe he'd come up write an article for one of his many magazines that he gets published in. There are T-shirts with that on it.
Yeah, I think Cocktail King really does those. So
you guys are getting into this, and now like we said, we've got the Death Wish.
Mm-hmm.
You're sponsoring my favorite indoor box lacrosse team, Albany Firewolves.
I mean, collaboration, that's one of the fun things about being a small business.
That's what I wanted to know. Like, how great is that?
It's my favorite part, honestly. The Death Wish thing started, I got a call. The guy was like, "Hey, I've got a coffee company. We want to make barrel aged coffee. Can we come talk to you guys?" I was like, "Yeah, come on down." He was like, "Really?"
Yep.
Yeah, just come down.
So I can see you and Mike getting along like that.
Yeah.
Like you guys just sort of like,
yeah.
I really love coffee. I really love liquor.
He thought it was gonna be like an ordeal, right? Like, and this is, I often say it's better to be lucky than to be good. He called me first because Albany Distilling was the first on his list. So he came down, brought the crew down, and we got him some barrels, and it was easy. We do a brandy on 9-pin cider around the corner here. We make an apple brandy with their cider. We called it the 10th pin. 9-pin.
Love it.
There's a place here called the Fort Orange General Store. We make a orange vodka with them.
That's so awesome. Well, you're kind of hitting on something that I want to get into. I want to mention. Look, folks, I'm trying to get him to make one thing. Let's see. Hold on. There we go. There's the 10 pin. Nice. Look, say hi, Miss Jen.
Hi.
And there's the Fort Orange vodka, and there's the 10 pin, the 10th pin from 9-pin. So, and then you can come down and see Jen's smiling face.
There's a smile behind it. I promise.
They do have Lincoln. There are canned cocktails. Let me see. Let's see if we can get it. Let's see. Can you see the canned cocktails over there? They're a little far away, but there are canned cocktails that you can pick up.
Look at
Look at that.
Gold star.
Look
for
at
the
that.
day.
Jen is so getting the gold star. Look at that. So you have the
Thanks,
variety packs that you can get into. And the canned cocktail is a very interesting, the ready to drink to me. I find it very interesting. Um, Product placement, you know it, Lincoln. Um, I'm trying to get, this is the one I have for John, and we're gonna see if we can get him to do it. So John loves D&D. Like I like it. So what I told him is he needs to come up with some way to drop a 20-sided dice inside of a bomb. And I still think
Choking hazard.
that would be like the like mescaline. It'd be like mescaline. And I think it'll be so great. Like you drop the 20-side in there, and for those of us that like D&D and that we like to drink, that will be how you do your like. How great would that be if that was your death save?
I mean,
Like that was your death save bottle. Hold on, this is look 6th edition D&D. You need to go ahead and get with Albany Distilling. We're going to put a 20-sided die in there. That'll be how you do your death saves. You have to finish the bottle, and then you can shake it. How
or
great is that?
we can shake it in there and just like
Let it fall all like when we were kids. The game with the ring
balls. Oh,
or the
yeah.
ring, like you had to squish it up and then.
Oh yeah.
See, I mean, we're coming up. See, I'm a genius when it comes to ideas. Please don't ask me how we're going to execute this. I have no idea. But yes, I mean, but you guys have done such an amazing job because you really are. Now you're an Albany institution. Let's get over yourself. You can go into any liquor store around Albany. They've got Ironweed. When you've got the rum, which I love, you've picked which story you like better, is the rum story or the Lord Commander Cuomo story. Either one. We're going to tell that here in a moment. You're going to tell them both. You just got to figure out which one first.
All right.
We're going to tell those. I'm going to tell everyone when you come out to Albany, you come to the Albany Distilling, there's a tour you can do of the actual facility. How often are the tours?
Every Saturday. Actually.
Every Saturday you can do.
There's one starting in 15 minutes.
So at 3 p.m., if you're in the Albany area, you can run over right now and be careful in the snow, and you can go do a tour, and then you can come out to the tasting room, which is on Livingston Ave, and you can do that. So there's tons and tons of opportunity here. Phenomenal products, but John, again, has some of the funniest stories to me because John is like myself. If I feel like I need to tell you something and I think you've missed out, I'm probably going to do it. John's like that kid that's like, that's not true. And everybody's like, let me tell you a story here, son. That's not true. Yeah. What do you mean, kid? I just saw you take your mask off and put on a fake mustache. Like he could have been one of the Bloodhound gang without a problem. So, which story you want to do first?
I know the Cuomo's crowd pleaser.
The Cuomo story is so great.
So we one of the advantages of being in Albany is that the capital's right there, and I will say this about Cuomo administration is that they were very pro craft beverage, right? So we do. That was really part of how we got started was because he saw that as an opportunity. So, great. That's all the credit. That's the credit.
What was it? $1,000 for a distilling license, as long as 75% of the product was New York based.
Oh, it's 128.
Oh, it was $128 for the license.
Yeah. Before that, it was 10 or 15,000. I forget exactly. So there was that was huge.
Monsters.
But there were a few, like as with any law, it was written with best intentions in mind, but they missed a few. There were a few gaps. And one of the weird things about liquor law, again, this is just obscure, is that as opposed to any other retail license. So say you have a coffee shop, right, or whatever, you get your tax ID. You're allowed to sell basically whatever you want. You can sell T-shirts, you can sell coffee, you can sell whatever, hammers, bricks, whatever you want, right? It's the sky's the limit. You don't when you apply for your license or whatever, you don't say I'm going to sell these things. Liquor is the exact opposite. When you get a license to sell liquor at retail, you're only allowed to sell specifically the things that the law says you're allowed to sell. So with the breweries and the wineries included in their the cideries included in their licenses was the ability to sell, um, you know, touristy T-shirts, whatever. So strictly speaking, it was illegal for us to sell T-shirts.
It's so weird.
It's weird. It is. It was silly. It was really just an oversight, right? It was not done intentionally. It wasn't like a controversial thing that they didn't want us selling T-shirts. It was just essentially just an oversight. So I called. It was like Schoolhouse Rock. How a bill gets passed. So I called our local legislator, Pat Fahey in the assembly, and
Met that before.
yeah, she's great. What's his name? He retired. George Amador in the Senate. At the time, the assembly was Democratic run, and Senate was Republican, so you had to get anyway.
Oh yeah,
that whole game. Anyway, so we had this bill drafted and really just copied and pasted the language. It was the easiest thing to do, honestly. Copied and pasted from the other bills, and the gist of it was that this law would allow distilleries to sell T-shirts and so forth.
other accoutrement.
Yeah. Not controversial, not a big deal, but super helpful for us. Passed the assembly and the House. The Assembly and the Senate rather unanimously signed into law. Like I said, zero controversy, and it was part of the craft beverage agenda. So Cuomo picked that as one of his bills. I guess every few years he'd pick his favorite bills, and he would invite the people involved over to the Capitol, up to the Red Room for the signing, like the ceremonial signing of the bill. And get there, it's a beautiful room. If you can see it on the Capitol tour, it's the wood paneling on mahogany or whatever. And there's some stained glass windows around the edges of the building, of the room rather. It's second floor. It's the southeast corner. So anyway, so we're all in there. There are I think 6 bills in total. We're one of 6 that he selected, and so we're all in there. Probably let's say there's 10 people per bill. There's 60 people in the room, whatever. And Cuomo comes in as we've been sitting there waiting. Comes in and he gives this speech, and he talks a lot about the history of the room. And his dad was governor. He grew up there, so he knows the place front to back. And he's talking about how, for example, when FDR was governor, he was in his wheelchair, so they had to cut the walls. Very sort of sneakily cut the walls to make a secret door so that he could wheel out and sit behind the desk, and they could seal that door back up so nobody knew he was in a wheelchair because it's the 30s and whatever, and people are anyway. So anyways, going on out of the history of the room, it's really fascinating. I'm looking around, so I'm soaking it all in. I look up at the windows, the stained glass, and it's grapes, it's apples, and it's grain. And what do those 3 things have in common? Well, it's alcohol, right? It's wine, cider, and beer. And we're in this room. Part of it, the reason I'm there is for an alcohol-related bill, and so I'm expecting at any minute to mention these windows. But he finishes his talk, and he calls it the first bill. And the protocol is so and so, on to the bill. Bill number 1. We're renaming a highway. I think the first bill was I think it was World War II, a black World War II soldier. They were renaming a highway for him, so his family was there. So they come up and they shake his hand and they stand behind him. He signs the bill, take a picture, back to your seat. Bill number 2, same thing. It's like he announces it, silent procession up. Shake your hand, stand behind, sit down. And at this point, a lot of time to stew over this, right? Like, how did you not mention these windows? And I would, as you alluded to, I have difficulty keeping my mouth shut. So when it came time for our bill to be signed, he called us up, and I positioned myself at the end of the line. So
Deliberately,
yeah. Maneuvered myself shake his hand, move on, shake his hand, move on, shake his hand, move on. And it comes to me, and I don't shake his hand. I say, before we do this, and first of all, it's like,
how dare you?
why? Like everyone in the room, like it's like record scratching. Why is this person talking? Like before we do this, we just go over quickly. You went through the history of the room, talked about everything. You didn't mention the windows. He's like, what do you mean, kid? It's like, well, you're talking about like all the features of the room, and these beautiful windows here are clearly, it's beer, wine, and cider right up there. You know what? He was like, well, listen, I grew up here. I never heard anything about this. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's the primary source. All you do is turn your head and look at them. So anyway, so we argued for what felt like a few minutes. And finally it was like, all right, that's the other show on the road. And I was like, fine. It's still not resolved. So we get behind him, take the picture, blah, blah, blah. We go back to our seats, and I'm still a little upset. And then fortunately, afterwards, there was a second photo op, right? Because the first one was him sitting at the desk doing the signing. The second one is everybody standing together holding the bill. And what do? But I jump in and I say, so just to, what are you, like, who are you?
Who is this guy?
Yeah.
It's like fucking with me.
Yeah,
right
exactly. Like, why are you talking? And so I start in the windows again, and he was like, all right. And I had an Albany Distilling, t-shirt on, or a polo shirt on, his logo. And he's like, more importantly, we're going to get one of those shirts. I was like, I'll send it over to you. What size are you? He was a petite, wise guy, and he stormed out of the room.
Anything to mess with Lord Commander makes me happy.
Yeah.
Look, Lincoln says, was he yelling security?
Yeah.
Security!
I've got a picture of it. I don't know if I can bring it
If you send it to me, we'll try to get it up.
Cool.
So now the other one is the rum. And Miss Jen, not to bother you again, do you have a bottle of the rum I can just see a picture of?
So funny story.
We don't have any of the rum.
New York State, we're not, because it's made of non-New York State grown ingredients.
Oh, you can't have it in the tasting room.
Yeah.
You can sell it at the liquor store, but you can't have it in the tasting room because the tasting room's all New York.
Yeah.
See that makes another one of those sides of the distinction between it.
Yeah. It's very silly though. I mean, any other bar, liquor store, anywhere in New York, you find anywhere in New York except for where it's made.
That's weird.
It's super weird.
So tell everyone the story of the rum. I think this is, and God, who knows who this guy was. I'm going to say it right now. As you hear this story, folks, just know that somebody's family missed out on a mint and could be like the next Captain Morgan's or whoever the hell that would be, Seagram's or whoever it is, and they missed out on an opportunity because this shit's good. I put this one. My favorite rum is Tortuga, and I don't know if it's a good rum or a bad rum. I have no idea, but that's my favorite.
It's all subjective. It's whatever you like is the best.
But I'm going to tell you right now. So go ahead and tell the rum story.
Where the first distillery was over by the pump station over in Quackenbush Square. And about 10 years before we moved in there, they built a new parking garage. And when they're digging the parking garage and they're digging the foundation, they came across these weird, sort of confusing wooden vats that have been remarkably well preserved. From when they dug the canal out in the 1820s, they infilled a lot of Albany to increase the shore. This buried all this stuff, and this is the former bottom of Lake Albany, right? It was very sandy soil, and sand was very dry, and it's good at preserving things. So anyways, they found these very, for what they were, 200-year-old wooden vats, well preserved vats. So they stopped construction. They called Hartkin Archaeology in. They did a full dig of the whole thing. They excavated it all. And it turns out it was the site of the Quackenbush Dow Still House, which started in about 1758 or so, 58, 59, and operated from that point up until about 1815, give or take. At which point they mothballed it. I'm sure they sold off the still or whatever. But a lot of the infrastructure was built in place. These wooden tubes, pipe, hollowed out logs they use for pipes and stuff. They don't move well, so they just abandoned it. So the archaeologist who led the dig, Justin, how's his last name? Virgilio, I think. Anyway, he got really into this whole thing, and he decided that he was going to figure out, not only he did the archaeology part of it, but he also then went into the archives and he wanted to find out more about what was happening there, and he couldn't find a ton of information. It was kind of, he had a lot of dead ends, and then out of the blue, a colleague of his was doing research on something totally unrelated and found a letter written from the Quackenbush family, the proprietor of the still, to a customer out in Boston, saying everything's down right now, but we should have it running tomorrow, and we'll get you a shipment in like 5 days or whatever, which gave us the knowledge that they weren't aging it, right? If the equipment's down, they're going to redo it. So it was unaged rum, and he also found a recipe, contemporary recipe for the age, that said to make rum, you mix molasses and water. You take water, you put an egg in it, a raw egg in the bottom, in the shell, the whole egg, and you add molasses until the egg floats. This is before they had scientific gauging tools, but as it turns out, the density of that of the egg was about, or I guess was just below the ideal mixture of water and molasses for sugar content.
Have you tried it?
That's what we did. That's how I made the recipe. It was about 5-to-1 molasses. Excuse me, water to molasses.
How's Luke feel when he's got to do that one?
Well, fortunately, the egg thing just happened once.
Okay, so it wasn't like Luke every day.
Yeah.
I need somebody to run.
Get the egg. Yes.
Somebody run down the store.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, get the egg.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was a neat way to sort of connect to Albany's really extensive history.
And it's a good rum too.
I don't disagree.
And would you? I mean, and you're getting a couple of questions here.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting one. I'd be curious. How do you feel about some of these? And I know you've said it a couple times already. Mm-hmm. Hey, whatever suits your taste at the time. Yeah. But some of these where, we've got the peanut butter whiskey, or I can't stand cinnamon. I'd rather take a sharp stick in the eye than any of that, the fireball bullshit. And I think it is. I don't care what anyone says. But those kind of things that you're getting away from what it is. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, honestly, I'm fine.
Are they still is it still a whiskey, or should it be in a whole nother category? This is more of I wouldn't say a liqueur, because that's a totally different thing in and of itself. But is it still in that category, or is it a new app?
If you look back to the history of whiskey, it was just done it was just made this way by default. Right, this is given the technology that people had, and the resources and the grains that they were using. That's where whiskey came from. It's just, bourbon is a perfect example, right? So there's the Homesteading Act. Everyone's moving out to the frontier, which at the time was former Bourbon County, Kentucky, Virginia, and essentially, long story short, to get land out there, you had to grow corn. That was the test, right? Because otherwise people would just say, yeah, I'll take 30 acres, and then never use it, never.
Right, just sit on it.
Yeah, so you had to grow corn to show that you were using it. And so, and this is before there was an easy route over the mountains. So you had all these people moving out there growing corn. That's a lot of corn. And, you're not going to, it's clunky, it's big, it doesn't keep well.
There's a lot of mix.
Yeah, you're not going to ship corn anywhere. But what you can do is make corn concentrate.
And it wasn't served, folks. It wasn't served.
Exactly. And so you make corn whiskey, and that keeps forever. It's highly, there's a huge resale value to it. You can stick it into a vessel, a barrel, whatever, and it's going to stay good until rapture. And so bourbon is basically just corn concentrate. Like that's where it started. And it wasn't always good. I mean, bourbon was like the cheap shit you got from out west. Bourbon really didn't get popular until after Prohibition.
Well, you watch, like I said, I've recommended that documentary Neat to a bunch of people, and it gets into how in the 70s hurt bourbon because the hippie generation looked at it and said, well, that's what my father drinks. I'm not drinking that. I'm going to drink beer.
Yep.
And it actually it tells the story of like one of the distilleries, somebody finding a barrel that was forgotten about that was sitting off in the back corner. The Angels got way more share than they planned for. and it tells the story how this guy was like, I'm going to sell that barrel as being something special because it's been aged longer and this, that, and the other. And in the process ends up rebirthing the entire industry off of that. We got a couple more questions here. One I don't know if you'll be able to answer. Lincoln says Fireball equals no at my table. I don't blame you unless you're in college or a 25-year-old trying to drown your sorrows. I don't understand Fireball.
Me either, but it's all.
Do you know, John? John, you can say it's not that good. I won't. I
honestly, I've never had it.
Have you really never? Oh my God, it's like God. See, like I like Rumplemints. You ever had Rumplemints?
Of course. Oh yeah. I was in my 20s once.
Yeah, right. There's a version that isn't there like a cinnamon version of Rumplemints?
Goldschlager?
Is it Goldschlager that's cinnamon? I'm trying to remember. Like there's a cinnamon version of that where it's like that shit is, and that's what it. But it's like, but it's like the old granddad version.
Sure.
Like we're old granddad for a bourbon. If you didn't know, old granddad is an actual bourbon. You know my favorite, like I ain't say because we'll talk about it afterwards because I ain't getting yelled at by John.
No, go ahead. I don't care.
I'm kidding, John. What is your favorite food when drinking? Like, do you have like, and it could be pizzas because I definitely like, I like a Dorito after I've had a few too many. But do you have like have you done any of that with anybody local here, like over at like Yono or anybody like that?
We've done a lot of pairings and things.
Like, have you ever done it with like Yono or anybody?
We haven't done it
or 677.
We've had a lot of events that were where the chef was there.
Like I think you should do something. That's going to be my opinion. You should do something with Yono.
Yeah, I mean he's great. I mean,
he's phenomenal.
Yeah.
But he does like if you go in there, they do like a whole course and a beer for each course.
Yeah,
or wine for each course.
We did that at yeah, we haven't done it. We did it at City Beer Hall. We've done it at a few country
City Beer Hall is good.
I don't know. I can't think of. We have done that quite a few times. It really depends on what you're drinking. Like if generally I don't like to mix drinking and eating.
Really?
Personally. Yeah, I rather just drink.
It's just
So
I'm going to go again and say that the malt and a hot dog. I know you're going to call me crazy, but the malt and a hot dog just sounds amazing to me.
Whatever you like.
I'm telling you, it's got such an awesome summer vibe to it. Like, cut the grass, sit down afterwards. I don't know if you have an answer to this one because I don't know if you do this, but Lincoln wants to know: can you recommend a good cigar with your rye?
I don't know much about cigars, honestly. Again, it's just like the only cigar that the only time I have cigars is when we do like a cigar night with like one of the local cigar shops here, and there's a guy there rolling them.
That's like hand rolling them.
Yep.
No shit.
And he'll use instead of like the whatever like water, he'll use the rye or the rum to as a binding agent.
Really?
Yeah.
Dude, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Did you hear that, Lincoln? We're gonna have to get you up here for one of the cigar night. Like, if you come up for a cigar night, I'm gonna come out for a cigar night because that just sounds like the coolest thing I've ever heard. Using the liquor as the binding agent, that's just John.
It's pretty cool.
John, that's the coolest fucking thing I've heard in a long time. That is like one of the coolest things I've heard in a long time. Look, I'm telling you, well, I'll have to connect you and
Sure. Yeah.
should I connect you and Lincoln or Brian and Lincoln? Let's figure this out.
Either one.
Because-
Where in the city is he?
You're in, I think he's, are you in Queens or Manhattan there, Lincoln? We'll have to figure out where you're
Yeah,
at.
we go down quite a bit. Yeah.
Because and he says Goldschlager is a Swiss cinnamon schnapps a liqueur. Brooklyn. See, I was completely wrong. That's how much I know about the city. But yeah, brother, you guys are, and again, folks, Albany Distilling, as you see, if you're watching the live right now, albany.distilling.com, scrolling across the bottom. The tasting room, again, is just phenomenal. You can pick up your stuff here at the tasting room. They have their Awakening Spirit, which has the coffee in it, Fort Orange vodka, Albany vodka, the Ironweed malt, Ironweed rye, Ironweed bourbon. But we're going to get ready to wrap it up. But I want to talk one more thing.
Sure.
And I think that Lincoln's going to love this. And I should, if I'd have thought about it, Lincoln, brother, I'd have had you come up. You know, you and your future bride could have come up and hung out.
Do it again?
We're going to do it again. We should do it again. And Lincoln's going to know all the great liquor questions to ask.
All right.
I'm just a kid who grew up in a liquor store. So I can ask those questions. But we're going to have to figure it out. You guys are working on another bill, aren't you?
I mean, we got a few. So one of the nice things about being a distiller in New York State is we have a huge community, right? So I'm part of the New York State Distillers Guild. We started that about 10, 11 years ago, 12 years ago. I think I've been on the board most of the whole time. Anyway, so we have about 200 distilleries in New York State. I'd say about half of us are in the guild. So we collaborate and try and get some bills passed. Right now we're trying to get Liquor Go.
That's a big thing now.
Yeah.
But you're trying to get something renamed. Your version of Kentucky bourbon.
Oh yeah, so it's the rye.
This I think is amazing.
Empire Rye. So that was a sort of subset of the guild. So there is. I mean, we haven't gotten it like official recognition through the Feds or the TTP.
So how does that kind of work? So like we've talked about Kentucky bourbon a couple of times.
Mhm.
I imagine is Irish whiskey the same way?
Irish whiskey isn't like the way that things work with like trade agreements. Irish whiskey is anything made in the Republic of Ireland according to their. Actually, I think it's the whole, because I think the Bushmills is in the north, but they're considered Irish whiskey as well.
But they're still in Ireland. It's still in Ireland.
Well, it's Northern Ireland, right?
Northern
So it's UK. So I'm not sure how it works. Anyway, but basically whatever their government says is Irish whiskey, the United States accepts Irish whiskey. And that's actually we could do a whole podcast about that right now. The Irish whiskey standards that's a hotly contested document right now, because up until similar to the way it's happened here, where there were 4 distilleries basically nationwide. In Ireland, there were 3 or 4 distilleries in the whole island that were making all these different kinds of whiskey. Now we're seeing Irish distilleries pop up all over the place.
Oh, really?
Like what's his name, McGregor?
Conor McGregor has his.
Yeah, that's one of many. And so they're, for the first time in decades or centuries, people are questioning the standards of Irish whiskey and whether they serve their purpose or not, or what tweaks need to be made, and so forth.
Really?
I mean, take Jameson for example.
Yeah, I like Jameson.
Yeah,
Very light.
Well, because it's only 30% whiskey and 70% neutral spirit.
I had no idea. Really?
Yeah.
See, and it's funny you said, so like I pour a glass of bourbon,
Mm-hmm.
and for those who didn't know this, all bourbons are whiskeys, not all whiskeys are bourbons.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very dark brown liquor.
Yeah.
And I probably hadn't poured myself a glass of Jameson in a while. Not for any other reason. I just didn't.
Yeah.
And I poured myself a glass of straight Jameson, and I was like, this looks like it's already had, been through 6 ice cubes and sat for a while. very. So I never knew it had neutral spirit.
Even the color that's in that could very well be artificial color. It could just be spirit caramel.
No shit.
Yeah, because the one that, I don't know if it's bottled, but one of the key differences, you can see back there, one of the key differences between Irish whiskey, Scotch, Canadian, and American whiskey is in the United States, bourbon, rye, malt, they have to use charred new oak barrels every time. So it's fresh.
Barrels got to be changed out every time.
Every time. And that's where the color comes from. It comes to the still crystal clear.
Right, that's white dog.
Yeah.
Do you do a white dog?
We used to. I have a bottle kicking around.
And for those of you that don't know what white dog is, white dog, to be considered a white dog, it's fresh out of the still. It has to just kiss the barrel and then get bottled.
Yeah.
Our friends who I believe, now you'll correct me, John, if I'm not mistaken, that are working with you are buddies over at New
Scotland.
Oh,
yeah.
New Scotland Distillery. They distill with you, right? Or something along those lines.
We're storing their barrels right now.
They're storing their barrels over there, and they make a white dog. That's one of their big things is a white dog. It's still a whiskey, folks. It hasn't been aged that way. It just kisses a barrel and then moves.
And that's how whiskey was made and consumed up until really the 1880s. Barrel aging is relatively new.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You think about making a barrel 200 years ago. You got to find an oak tree. You got to saw it down.
It's a bigger process.
Yeah. I mean, where are you doing this? Right? Like out in the woods somewhere with a horse. Like saw down an oak tree, you drag it to a river, you float it down to a sawmill.
We take that for granted today.
Absolutely.
We don't even think about that. Log jam doesn't mean anything.
Right. Exactly. But back then it was a big deal. And not only do you have to get to a sawmill, but then you have to quarter saw it, and quarter sawing even now is a pain. There are no mills in New York State that will do quarter sawn wood. It's not an easy process. And then coopers making a barrel, they basically a master cooper could make one barrel a day after a 4-year apprenticeship minimum.
The
barrels were not easy to come by.
And you're talking about back then, not today.
Even today, they're a pain in the ass. But imagine 200 years ago, you're not going to just fill a barrel and stick it in the corner.
No.
If you're filling a barrel, I think of barrels of the way we think of shipping containers now. Right? Like they were that necessary and that expensive and that
prevalent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're not going to fill a shipping container with whiskey and stick it in the corner. That's a waste of a shipping container, right? Like so barrels were just being used to transport back and forth over and over again. It wasn't until after the Industrial Revolution where they could automate some of these processes that barrels became, affordable enough to use as just for aging. And it was really discovered by accident, right? Like, so if you get a barrel, you're shipping.
Like somebody forgot about the shit. It was just sitting off.
Well, that's part of it. Yeah.
It's like shedding a tear for Lord Admiral Nelson.
But it's, delicious Admiral.
For those who don't know what that means, you go look up what shedding a tear for Lord Admiral Nelson means. I'm not explaining that one to you.
But if you're shipping, that's a good example. Say you're shipping rum from one place to another, and then on the return trip, you're filling that barrel with herring, right, or whatever. Right? And then you go back, and you're like, this smells like herring. What do? You fill the barrel with straw, you burn it out, and that charring of the barrel removes the flavor. So that's why barrels are charred, because they yes, and now it's done intentionally. Whereas before, it was just done.
You ever just have a fucking aha moment? I would have never put those two together because of they had to be reused, they had to be done. So.
Yeah, it's just necessity.
Holy shit.
And then you have this barrel, and you're like, oh, well, I guess we'll bring whiskey home, fill the barrel with whiskey. It takes whatever, a few months, years, depending on where it sits in the hold of the ship for that long. Then you empty, you're like, oh wow, this tastes much better than before we put it in there. And that's where it all came from. It was all
John, I'm fucking mind blown right now. Like I never thought about, hey, how are you going to get the smell of whatever else was in there out?
And then if you look at what happened next, right? So the people discovered that this was a cool way of making whiskey taste better. And immediately you get people starting to fake it, right? Because you have to buy an expensive barrel, and it takes a long time to make this product. So what do? Yeah, you throw in some nails. Ever heard of the drink Rusty Nail?
Yeah.
Because nails rust looks a lot like aged whiskey. Throw in some nails, a little bit of camphor, maybe whatever, little splash of this and that. And so then in 1897, you get the Bottled and Bond Act. That's actually one of the first consumer protection laws, right? Because it was because aged whiskey was getting popular, and everybody started making fake aged whiskey.
Well, that's like Heinz. Like your story, dude. We're gonna make a hard left here for a minute.
Yeah.
Like you know the story of Heinz, right?
Yeah.
So Heinz ketchup that we think of today, tomato-based ketchup.
Yeah.
Ketchup, if you look at the history of it, was actually just a term for a thing that we put on our food to cover up rotted or food that might be going bad at the time. So it was a thing to put on the food.
Yeah.
So Heinz sat down and was constantly looking for a good recipe, and he came up with one. But in that same time frame that you're talking about, we had more stomach cancer than at any time in human history. That was a big problem. That's why you have up here in upstate New York in Saratoga Springs, you had all these like health retreats and the baths and all that that was supposed to relieve stomach issues. It was because we were growing as a population and everybody needed more food, so they were coming up with more preservatives. Well, most of these preservatives were carcinogenics, and we were ending up with stomach cancer. And where Heinz made his money wasn't just on coming up with an amazing recipe. He used clear bottles. And the clear bottle allowed you to see the ingredients inside of it. And because you could see the ingredients inside of it, you knew what the product was, you knew what you were about to use. And that blew people's minds because before then, everybody used brown bottles and green bottles.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I never.
Yeah.
Welcome to the education minute, folks. Like we just fucking changed the game here for a minute completely. So we're getting into this, and look, John, I absolutely agree that you and I could probably sit here for another 2 hours because you are a plethora of knowledge on this subject.
Occupational hazard, I guess.
But you know what? And Lincoln says white dogs are delicious. I've never had a white dog.
Yeah, let's see what we got.
We're gonna. John's do what you got to do. We're gonna talk for a minute. John's gonna go look and see if he's got his white dog. Or I've never had a white dog. So basically, if you ever get a chance to see one, it's a whiskey that's completely clear. For those of you who can't see it, we'll get John. You see John's behind the bar. Look at him. He's pouring us a white dog right now. So let's see if he's got. Bring the bottle over. So let's see the bottle for a minute, John. So this is Coal Yard Distillers Series new make whiskey. So I love the fact that like this has got some extra stuff on it. I love the fact that the mark has been removed for everything. Yep, whiskey distilled from Bourbon Mash, Albany Distillery, Albany, New York. Like I said, I've never had people coming in and coming out. That's why I say this tasting room is pretty impressive. I'll wait to try the white dog before when John comes back. But it smells good. It's got a very like you can like where you smell most whiskeys, and they've got a very I don't know what else to call it. I guess you're getting the notes off of the barrel and the wood and everything. Because like I'm smelling the other one that I've got, the malt, and it's got a very malty smell to it. It's got a very different smell. Yeah, Lincoln, we'll connect up, brother. Shoot me a message. Figure out when you can come up, and we'll make this happen. No doubt about it. I want you to come up. We'll do this, and we'll get tiny hot dogs, or I'll take you to Fazio's next door, and we'll have amazing pizza. But we'll wait on John here, and I'll try this white dog. But should we ask him what color the soap was when he comes out? That's my favorite question to ask anyone. I'm gonna tell a secret. It's my wife's thing. Anytime somebody goes to the bathroom and you're at a bar or you have kids, ask them what color the soap was. You really want to see if somebody washed their hands. You will really jack people all the way up. It's my favorite thing to do is ask people what color the soap is. I don't think we'll do that to John. because I don't want to. I think John washed his hands, but that's a whole nother thing. But definitely one of my favorite things. Ask your children next time they go to the bathroom. Be like, "Hey kids, what color was the soap?" You will see them be like, "Huh? What?" I don't know what you're talking about. But I love this place. There's just nothing bad about it. There's so many cool things going on here, and even Albany as a city. We call it Smallbany. I'm not from here originally. I grew up in Baltimore, but there is no place once springtime comes around. I promise you. Look, see people leaving with bottles right now. Uh, I promise you that once you get here and in the springtime in the Albany area, we've got Jazz Fest going on. We've got concert series is up at SPAC. It's just one of those kind of places. And what's the what do we got different here?
That's the age stuff.
This is what? How old is that? Like I'm waiting on you, John. I'm gonna make this happen. This is waiting on you. I was talking about all the cool stuff, I'm telling you, folks, there's the liquor history in this area, and not even just liquor like John and I are talking about. Even getting into beer.
Oh yeah, and like the whole Dan O'Connell thing, the Albany machine.
Yeah, I mean, at one point in time, and it's finally when it's rebirth. If you like good beer, Omegang is a great beer, and Omegang is in the heart of hops territory, and they have like Albany was known for this area was known for its hops. It had an amazing hops, and yes, my buddy John is saying yes. We just added the International Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame is right here and going to be at now the MVP Arena.
No shit,
you didn't know that? Bro.
I think maybe yeah.
Like I might have to get you hooked up with those guys.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
That would be look. Could you do a bottle with like a little belt on it? We could do a bottle with a little champion's belt on it.
Love it.
Like, I have horrible ideas that nobody but me and you are going to buy, John.
Just we'll make one bottle of that, one bottle with the D20 inside. Yeah, fine.
Just you and I are going to buy it because just you and I are going to be like, this shit's fucking great. This is the greatest thing ever. So, White Dog, folks. This is my first ever White Dog.
So it's an unaged bourbon. So it's aged for about half an hour in a used barrel, during which time nothing happened, but legally we can call it whiskey.
Okay.
So you're going to taste, so it's bourbon, so it's mostly corn.
That's what that smell is.
Yep. Alex uses a lot of rye and malt barley in there, which are grasses, so it tastes like corn and grass.
That makes, as soon as, like, I was trying to figure out how to explain that smell, because, like, when I smell the rye or the malt has a very...
Oh, yeah, and this is the aged bourbon, so that's 4 years old. So that's the exact same liquid with, 4 years in oak.
And you can smell the oakiness.
Oh, yeah.
And then, I know this doesn't make for great radio, folks, as it's just me going... It's ASMR is what it is. This is my version of ASMR.
Yeah, that's what you're into. Sniffing sounds. Yeah. I'm sure there's a...
Now that you're trying to go to sleep right now.
There's a very small market out there for it.
I know you're looking for a time to go to sleep, and we'll just go ahead and talk about this for a moment as I... Right now, if you're still sticking with John and I, you're just listening to two jackasses who just want to drink. So let's try the White Dog.
Oh, I love your patio.
Yeah, I've already slowly started doing stuff.
Now that's different.
I'm ready for it too.
I don't even know how to describe that, John.
I mean, it's the corn and the grass, or the corn and malt.
That's it. It's the grass that I'm tasting,
and that's why it's called a spirit. You get the spirit of what's going into it. Like, you want to think about like as the etymology where these words come from. You're taking the essence, the spirit of the grain.
Clear that out. How did you clear your palate? With another whiskey.
Well, yeah.
No, this is the age. That's got such a beautiful smell to it. The age.
Yeah, a lot happens in the barrel. I mean, it's not just the color. Obviously, is the most evident thing, but all those flavors are being oxidized, and you're getting the wood compounds being soaked into it. So there's a it's complex.
That's very different. See, that's the caramel in that.
Yeah, so and that's when you caramelize lignin, which is what makes wood woody. You get all those wood sugars, you get the vanillins and stuff like so. It's really
It's different.
Yeah.
So so we're working on the Empire Rye.
Mhm.
We got some things going on. Anything else coming up? Any events where if somebody was up in the Capital District? Anything else that's coming up?
in a couple weeks. We're doing drink Schenectady, so part of the Capital Craft Beverage Trail to the 50-ish producers in the Capital District. We got a little trade group together, and we used to do 4 events a year when COVID hit. Now
COVID fucked up so much.
Now we're doing our first event on the 19th. Our first event since COVID hit. So it'll be a tasting event at the Museum of Science in Schenectady.
I think that's so fitting. The Museum of Science.
I mean, really, it is
Because it's science.
It is.
It really is.
Yeah.
So that's coming up when?
And the root of chemistry, like alchemy, that's where it's how it all started. It was making
Turning one thing into another. Alchemy is turning one thing into another, and that's what you guys do.
Yeah.
So, and that's when?
March 19th.
And how long before we're going to be across the country?
Whiskey, I don't know. To be determined.
But the vodka's
in California, Florida right now. We're getting out there.
just whoring yourself out there.
Yeah, hey,
do
listen.
what you got to do.
Yeah.
Pimping ain't easy.
It's not. But it's fun.
Oh, I love it. John, this has been such a blast.
Yeah.
I appreciate you having us.
My pleasure, man.
We didn't get fully into D&D chat. That's going to be some nerdy shit.
Yeah, that'll be
afterwards.
round 2. Yeah.
Round 2, some extra nerdy shit.
Get your Lincoln up here, everybody.
Well, that's the whole thing. We got to get Lincoln to come up here, and we'll get him to write an entire article because, I mean, he's legit.
I'll take your word for it.
Don't take my word for it. Take his writing. As we always do on every episode, you get the last word. So what's the last word of the day?
Thanks for sticking to that, man. And thank you for having me.
Alrighty, folks. Be sure to push your stool in.
This has been an Earplug Podcast presentation. Found on earplugpodcast.com, iTunes, SoundCloud, and wherever your favorite podcasts are found.